I want to, I wanted to start with you by talking about your connection to Israel and Judaism, but I won't.
Right.
Because we spoke so much about social responsibility, and social media rose over and over again, and you're an expert on that. So give me the pros and cons of the situation in which we are now.
In relation to what?
In relation to Israel, Judaism, and what's going on around us.
Well, let me sort of back up a bit, because I've been listening intently to what people have been saying. And the first thing I want to, I try for 30 years, 32 years, ran WPP. Start up about 4 years ago. We now have 9,000 people in 32 countries. WPP at its height had about 130,000 people, directly employed about 200,000 people, including indirect. There is no conflict at all between running a company and social impact or impact. I mean, there's a fundamental, I think, misunderstanding, and we overcomplicate the issue. I mean, a number of sessions today have been quite complicated in explaining relationships between profitability and impact. And if you were to take Milton Friedman's original theory of the firm, which was to maximize profit, if you just alter it in one very simple way and insert the hyphenated word long-term, you solve all the problems. I mean, all the stuff about stakeholder theory, impact investing, social investing, I think can be really boiled down to that one thing. Actually, the man who sort of first came up with it was probably in 1997. John Brown, ironically, the ex-head of BP. Given what happened to BP, it was interesting he made that observation. But if you're in business for the long term, there is no conflict whatsoever between impact, social, and profit-making. Because what you're doing is taking into account the interests of all stakeholders. So I think that's one thing I wanted to try and get out on the table. In terms of what you asked me about in relation to Israel, Judaism, and the like at the moment, the world is really changing extremely dramatically. If we were having this conversation on January the 1st, as opposed to close to September the 1st, we wouldn't have been so focused on a war in this continent, not many miles away from here. We wouldn't be so focused. Climate change probably had attracted a lot of focus, but you take today's news about floods in Pakistan, obviously that's very high up the agenda. Interest rate increases, inflation, all the problems that we're wrestling with. I think Israel actually, and Judaism really, is in a relative, I know there's a lot of depressing stuff we heard today, particularly the statistics around assimilation and the diaspora. But I think Israel actually is in a really interesting position. Because I'm 77 now, and I've lived in an era of globalization. It really started, I guess, there was a famous professor at Harvard Business School called Ted Levitt, who wrote an article on globalization in October of 1983. I always remember it, when I was at the Saatchi Agency, and we based the Saatchi Agency on the development of globalization around the world. And for the last 50 years, we've seen the benefit of globalization, deflation, rise of technology, deflation as a result. And we're obviously now entering a very different phase. It's a very much more fractured and fragmented phase. And I said we operate in 32 countries. We are now. At WPP, we operated, in 113 countries. There's no need with the rise of technology to operate in as many countries. You can make it as much more regional. But if I look at the world from a geographic point of view, we're going to be much more selective about what we do and how we do it on a geographical basis. I mean, I think the prospects for North America, despite extremism and what may happen in the midterms, and what may happen in the next presidential election in 24. But my own personal view is, regretfully, there will be a move again to the right. And whilst some people in this room or outside it might want that to happen. I'm not so sure it's a good thing from the point of the US reputationally, but I think there will be a shift again to the right when we get to 2024. But I think the economic prospects for the United States are strong. Latin America, interestingly, has very strong tech and creative capabilities. I'm very bearish on Europe, very bullish on the Middle East, of which obviously Israel is a part, but nobody has talked today about the shift in wealth, which has been absolutely huge in the last few months. You know, if you think you woke up one morning and doubled or tripled your net worth, which is what has basically happened.
I'm a journalist. It will remain zero.
In the in the Arab part of the world, huge change there. And then the third thing, of course, is what's happening in Asia. And the role of China and the dominance of China, there are clearly counterweights. So, for example, take something that happened just last week, Apple's decision to locate new manufacturing plant in Vietnam. Just let me finish that. These countries are going to become extreme. The balance of power is going to shift in Asia very significantly. That gives great opportunities to Israel, a technological leader, a startup nation. Short-term startup thinking, we can come back to that because I talked about the importance of long-term thinking. I think Israel is really interesting in a world that is going to be much more volatile and much more fragmented and fractured. Israel is very interesting because it's a brain. Israelis, I don't want to offend anybody, I will do. I don't think they're particularly good at running large companies. They're not good managers. They're very good entrepreneurs. You know, the melting pot that Israel represents, my grandfather, and on both sides, came from Eastern Europe and settled in the UK and the US. But the melting pot that Israel represents is really extremely strong and has significant opportunities in that.
Let me say differently. Israelis, us, are very good in sprint. Stephen Adams here, and he's strongly into sports. We're very good sprinters.
The Tour de France is not a sprint.
No, but whereas it was the Giro Italia, whereas the business world is a marathon, and we want exits, whereas the world wants business.
Well, it's interesting. I've always believed, like my father did, and maybe that's a fault of a Jewish businessman, a retailer, in long-term brand building. But actually, McKinsey says that the average S&P company survives for about, I think it's 11, 12, or 13 years. So the world has become much more volatile. A long-term brand building may not be the best thing. So coming back to Israel for a minute, the fact that it is so strong from a technological point of view, from an entrepreneurial point of view, from a startup point of view, might be a spectacular advantage in a world where, because you and I were discussing this, the world wants to invest in successful models. The startup mentality is, where's my exit? And they may very well provide the exits. I mean, this is one of the big problems in the West as well. Everybody talks about private equity and venture capital. What is the time frame of most private equity companies and most venture capitalists? Probably 3 to 5 years. When they actually put together their IMs, their investment memoranda, what do they focus on? They focus immediately on the exit. How are they going to exit their investment? They're not exactly long-term. So coming back to Israel and its role in that fragmented, increasingly fractured world, in a world where US-China relationships are going to be extremely fragile, where Russia is going to continue to be a problem, I think, in the long term, in the absence of regime change, and where the third big issue, of course, is around Iran and what may or happen imminently, maybe, in relation to the West's relationship with Iran. That creates tremendous movement and fragility.
We have a very short time left. I want to ask you one last question. Taken where the social media is going, I don't know where it's going, but it doesn't seem to a good place. How Israel the Jewish world, the Zionist movement, everything we're around that here. What should we do? How can we do it to do it better, to create a better future for ourselves?
Social media is the root of all evil, right? The root cause of any problem and every problem is social media. I mean, I have to declare our largest client is Google. Our second largest is it's NDA, but it's a telecoms company which is probably the largest company in the world. And then third would be Facebook or Meta. So I have a vested interest. And of course, if you look at growth and capability, they will continue to grow and they will continue to dominate in the West, the three that I mentioned, along with Amazon, and along with Microsoft. And in the East, it will be ByteDance and it will be Alibaba and Tencent, and they'll continue to be dominant. Now, the ability that it's given people to connect on a global basis, in my view, far outweighs any of the issues that you're implying. In other words, the connectivity, I mean, if the examples that we just saw from the three women that presented, which were extremely powerful, each and every one of them extremely powerful, has been aided and abetted by these evil social media that you're referring to. So, and don't tell me, you work in traditional media as well, don't tell me that traditional media have not been biased, that traditional media have not exaggerated the truth in time, or not, fake news. It's always been the case. I mean, traditional media empires that have been dominated by entrepreneurs or by owners have all had political biases. And there's one other thing I did, because Sylvan raised this question about, where is the state of Israel government in relation to communications, the sort of work that he does to try and to improve the Israeli aura. And there's one other thing I would make. The example of Africa that was just highlighted, I think is really interesting, because what it will enable Israel to do is to demonstrate the soft power. I mean, that's a classic example to my mind of soft power at work. The aura around Israel is improved. The Chinese get it as well, but their execution leaves a little bit to be desired, in terms, to put it mildly, in terms of the way they do it. But coming back to Sylvan's point, I had the same experience that he had many years ago. When I was running WPP, we were asked to go and visit. Netanyahu was the prime minister then, and we were given, a reasonable reception, but nothing materialized. And the reason that nothing materializes is not a common problem just for Israel. There are two examples I can think of where government communication has been effective. The first was under the UK government, David Cameron, and the Great Britain campaign, and the second would be Singapore on a consistent basis. And the reason that it worked in both of those cases was that the Prime Minister centralized the public relations and communications policy in his office, 10 Downing Street in Singapore, a fairly autocratic regime as well. And what you need is a very strong central driver. And what happens, for example, is a coalition in Israel, has been in a way for many, many years, and trying to get a consensus is impossible.
Israelis, Jewish people, consensus.
Well, the problem I've always had in Israel, we tried to run a business in Israel, in the agency business, and I know Maurice and others have tried as well. It's impossible. How the Israeli army functions is a miracle to me, because everybody has a point of view, which is really interesting in the case of the growth of Israel.
Everybody has many points of view in Israel.
Yeah, and that's why the entrepreneurial culture and the startup culture works so effectively.
Sir Martin Sorrell, thank you so much for joining us.